Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index. It is Monday, the 30th of June, which means if you are a bit of a football nerd, it is officially the end of the 24-25 season. 25-26 starts tomorrow. It's PSR deadline day, which doesn't bring excitement to many, but transfers certainly do. So we'll get onto everything around that. I'm your normal host, Dave Davis, coming to you from a practically balmy Edinburgh. It's 20 plus degrees and it's not even midday. I am, of course, joined by the renowned and the respected David Lynch, who I'm guessing, is it tops off style in Edinburgh, tops off style in Merseyside as well?
Yeah, it's really nice here as well. Yeah, I think it's getting up to something like 29 later, which is an absolute joke, to be honest. But yeah, it's nice. It's like still being on holiday, so I'm loving that.
It is pretty good. And we always start these pods recently with a bit of an obscure question. I'm not going to ask you to play the guitar again. I think that one's dead. But in the heat, David Lynch, patch journalist, what is the best ice cream you can get in the heat?
Do you know what? I'm partial to a Twister, I have to say. I think they are number one. Fruity, just refreshing. Yeah. In fact, that's genuinely put that in my head for later. I might a little walk round to the shop round the corner and treat myself.
Yellow and green one, that isn't it, with the red
Yeah,
middle.
yeah. The original is the best, absolutely.
Yeah, that is one. I tell you what, I might be wandering around to the shops myself. Hopefully, it is good wherever you are. And we'll get into it, ladies and gents. We'll start where we always do with off the field matters. And as much as everyone's talking transfers, there's a lot happening off the field at the moment. And this one, I don't want to say it came from nowhere, but Liverpool seemed very good at keeping coaching appointments quiet. We had Van Bronckhorst come from nowhere. It wasn't rumoured. Then all of a sudden, Rob Page is appointed head coach of the under-21s, replacing Barry Lutas, who'd been there for donkey's years. This one did just kind of come out the blue, to be fair, though, didn't it?
Yeah, not a name I'd kind of heard in the build-up, or even anyone alluding to. So a complete surprise, to be honest, and one they've done well to kind of keep under wraps. And yeah, a little bit of a surprise one, because you think about what his last job was, and obviously being in senior football there, you'd expect he kind of would want to stay there and maybe look at kind of senior jobs in club football or whatever. But obviously that's not the route he's gone down. He's come to Liverpool to do the 21s and. For them, spoke about Gio Van Bronckhorst being a bit of a coup because he'd had obviously management experience to go into a coaching role. And I think similarly here with Rob Page, he did a decent job with Wales. And I think the thing, speaking to people at Liverpool, that was most appealing from their side of things is that obviously he'd been kind of a youth manager with Wales before he'd been the under-21s manager. So he knows how to work with that kind of age group, but also the fact that he took that then into the first team environment and dragged a lot of those kind of youngsters with him into that. So, you think of kind of the role that Harry Wilson ended up taking on under him and there are countless others. I think Nico Williams is another one. So a few Liverpool links there as well, actually. But yeah, he's someone who's, shown that he's very good at kind of preparing young players for that next step into first team football. So it's a really good fit for him, a great place to work at the academy with a really good setup and obviously some really, really talented youngsters as well. So on the face of it, looks like a really smart appointment and one that you hope will work out in terms of, helping players bridge that gap and make the jump up to the first team.
Which is, probably what a lot of people will be looking for the under-21s, the youngsters we've got to do. Is there any that you're looking in the youth sides right now who you're thinking that could benefit from this, that could just, with a bit of help from someone who's got that experience, make the leap into senior football?
I think the obvious ones are the ones who are already kind of around the fringes. So you look at Rio Engamoa, who made his debut last season. Trey Naoni's been close to it as well. Yeah. So, they're the couple really who you're keeping an eye on who will be in that 21s group. And the expectation is, can they push for League Cup minutes? Can they do anything there to kind of help out the first team? So, they're the ones really. And they're both still incredibly young for 21s football, by the way. But the idea is to put them there early so that they can get a step closer to men's football. And so, I think they're the kind of main projects they'll be working on is looking after players like that. But there are always a few around there as well who will get surprise opportunities because of injuries and moments where they'll come in that you don't think that they're going to. So his job's to make sure all that group is kind of as close to ready to play for the senior team as possible.
Will be interesting to see how they get on, especially with the pre-season tour. And if they make any bows or get any time in that, it will be one to keep an eye on. And off the field matters a bit different. We're going a bit financial, but it is one that seems to be developing. FSG in this second club, we talked about it the other week, but there does seem to be real legs in this Getafe one, doesn't there? It keeps getting mentioned time and time again.
Yeah, I've not had any kind of real concrete update on where that's up to, really. So we'll just kind of see how that develops. But it's it's just clear, isn't it? They need to get this sorted soon, don't they? I mean, it's such an important facet of what they've kind of built now with Michael Edwards at the head of it and bringing back Julian Ward in that role. They need to get this moving, really. So you'd hope for some kind of move on that. I mean, they'll have been very interested, by the way, to see the developments around multi-club models and what that's meant for Crystal Palace at the moment, the controversy there. So got to be very, very careful about how they do it and kind of what level these clubs are at. And if they are going to be in contention for European competition, you've got to kind of sort that out and make sure they've got all the ducks in a row. But it's, it was the next step of this move, wasn't it? It was the whole reason that Michael Edwards was there. So, they need to get that going, really, and give him something to get his teeth into.
It's interesting as well with reports that Levante, another Spanish club on the radar, top-level Portuguese clubs as well. Does it surprise you at all that it is clubs of a certain level? Because when they looked at Bordeaux, they were in the second league in France, whatever that's called. But now it does seem like La Liga clubs or teams like that can be a certain standard. Do you think that's come into the mix as well?
Yeah, I think with Bordeaux, it was just the case it was a distressed asset because at the end of the day, that is a club that should be playing at a higher level anyway. And I think if FSG had gone in, the likelihood is they'd have had them back in Liga and pretty quickly, really. So, I think they were always kind of looking for a top flight club. It was just that was a specific kind of opportunity, really. But they obviously see opportunities elsewhere as well and possibilities to add to the portfolio. So, yeah, just about kind of getting it done now and seeing which one's the most viable opportunity. But as you say, at the moment, that feels like it might be Getafe, but we'll see whether they get it done or not.
Yeah, we'll see if it evolves in the near future. And I suppose why we're talking finance as well, it is PSR deadline day, if you want to call it that. Is there a feeling sort of from you for Liverpool and wider Premier League that it might almost be a quiet day today because we're reaching that year end, but from tomorrow onwards, clubs will know where they are or aren't financially, so stuff might really start to evolve?
Yeah, I get the sense that there's not as much panic amongst Premier League clubs today in terms of as there was last time around. I mean, you saw a few of them, Newcastle, one of them involved in kind of fire sales to make things right before the deadline. You've not seen many stories that suggest many clubs are in that position so that we're going to see kind of similar panic or opportunities pop up or anything like that. So from Liverpool's perspective in terms of that, it doesn't feel like anything's kind of happening there or any clubs are really worrying about the positions. So, not sure they're going to have a fire sale to take advantage of. But I think for Liverpool, maybe kind of this second phase of business now bleeds into this next PSR period. And they've done everything they've done. They've spent massively, haven't they, in this first part? But this second half and this next PSR period is going to be more about kind of sell to buy and kind of balancing the books a little bit. So, but we think that they're going to be active. That is the expectation. So it's going to be kind of, there's going to be exits 100%. And once there are exits, they're going to need to be replaced. So it's going to be busy again. And it's maybe not so much structured around PSR and how that's working. That's just maybe coincidental. But this was always how the summer was going to be structured for Liverpool. But yeah, it's still going to be busy. There's still a lot to do. There's a lot of outs and a lot of ins to oversee in this next period. So it's going to be a crazy time and a lot to talk about, I think.
And we will be talking about it on this show before the chat panel panics around transfers. That will definitely be on the agenda. But also on the off-field matters. I mean, that is a cracking photo there. Saturday evening, wasn't it? Harvey Elliott scores, Tyler Morton assist, Liverpool trio lift the Euros with England under 21s. I mean, that was a brilliant game. I haven't really watched any games, but I did watch that one. Did you catch any highlights or watch it live at all?
Yeah, I watched a bit of the game. I probably watched it from the second half onwards, so caught quite a bit of it. And brilliant for England, by the way, just in terms of to win that tournament back to back says a lot about kind of youth development in this country and the direction it's in where it's been. And you think of a couple of decades back and the debates that used to roll around after every major tournament, but now England are the kind of big dogs in youth football. So, that should be remembered. They've got a pipeline there of serious talent coming through. So that kind of just proved it. And to see Liverpool players and Liverpool youngsters at the heart of it again, I think feels hugely encouraging. Obviously, Harvey Elliott was recruited, but still, that's part of youth football at the moment. That's a big part of it, is your ability to recruit at that level. And then Quansah and Morton, who've both been developed from very, very young ages, both local lads, one from the Wirral, one from Warrington, is, just says a lot about Liverpool and how they are doing at the moment in terms of youth development as well. So really, really good. And they all played a big part in it as well. Obviously, the downside is that probably all three might leave this summer, but I mean, that is also part of having an academy as well, that you accept that not everybody's going to make a sustained and prolonged impact on the first team. Some of them are going to have to move on to have good careers, but that is also worthwhile for the club and for the players.
And it does sound almost harsh on a way to finish this story, because it's a great photo. It's been a great tournament for all three of them. But the longer the tournament's gone on, this has realistically added to the value of the three, hasn't it? And Liverpool will be aware of that. I mean, sounds horrible, but probably unlikely all three are at the club next season, if any.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it. It kind of strengthens Liverpool's hand in negotiations. I mean, you look at Harvey Elliott, probably the player of the tournament, really. And so, if that had been a Spanish kid who's burst onto the scene is the player of the tournament in the under-21 Euros, you say, how much Barca or Real Madrid or whatever going to sell him for would be absolutely outrageous. So, we just know how good he is, and I don't think Liverpool should be giving him away this summer, as much as his prospect for minutes is not great, and he has that tough decision to make about whether he does stay and fight or whether he moves on. Liverpool shouldn't be accepting a low fee for him, because he's a unbelievable talent, and he showed that amongst his peers in that tournament. And obviously with Jarell Quansah, he is moving on. That's very close to completion today. But again, they've got a decent fee out of that and a buyback clause. And with Tyler Morton, similarly, he is a top class player, and I think Championship and lower half Premier League clubs should be all over him, really, with the quality he's got. So the academy is going. It's not the dream when you bring these players through. You want them all to be in the first team, but it can also raise you an awful lot of money, and I think you're going to see that with all three players this summer.
Yeah, and we will be talking about them all, unfortunately, maybe a little in the exit part, but we'll see what develops with all three of these. And I mean, this one, off the field matters, and I'm kind of asking you this specifically with a focus from the media perspective, because probably seen the change that they're making, the 3 new innovations, that subs coming off at half-time or at a certain point can be interviewed, that the cameras to a limited extent can be put in the dressing rooms, it seems, but also cameras involved in the goal celebration as well, and suggestions that to keep pace with the US counterparts. What are you making of these 3 changes?
It's just a bit of nonsense, really, isn't it? You don't want to kind of be completely against change and the way things are going, and I don't want to be that old man shouting at the clouds kind of thing, but it does, I don't know, it's just a bit naff, I think, really, a lot of this stuff. And I think if you had Jurgen Klopp about and the dressing room access element of this, he wouldn't be happy about. And I don't know about the camera in the celebrations thing, by the way, if you want to maybe explain a little bit more of that, or if there's a part of this article that kind of shows that.
It's literally, say, allowed to enter the pitch in order to capture close-up footage of goal celebration. This is the madness of it to me. Did a bit of digging on this, and from the US side, the big thing they like in, the EA Sports games, the FIFA stuff, is where the players are up close, and they think that sort of thing will go up well with US audiences.
I mean, they've probably got a point in that you think about maybe the celebrations at Brentford last season, and kind of Liverpool had a phone camera, didn't they, that kind of got in there, and that was really good, to be fair. So I guess that aspect of it, you don't want them to kind of be too invasive in getting close to the players, because you want them to be natural and not think there's a camera on them constantly close that can hear everything they're saying. So, there's that aspect of it, but I suppose that will be interesting. I think it's the rest, the kind of halftime interviews, the stuff about the dressing room access. I guess the professionals involved will maybe not absolutely love that. But yeah, this is how things are, and you've got to accept the change, I guess, a lot of the time, because there's not an awful lot you can do about it.
It will be interesting. I do think back, though, to the opening day. Can you imagine if they got Jarell Kwanzaa interviewed at half-time as he's hauled off against Ipswich, like on a slot straight away? It could be. I know it would give, obviously, footage and headlines and stuff to reporters, but it would have been quite interesting, put it that way. We'll see how this bears out for the season. And then, in a sad note, we don't really talk about them too often, but the Liverpool women's team, Taylor Hines, their long-serving, I think she's been skipper, vice-captain, has obviously left on a free transfer. For those that do follow the women's football, this is a bit of a sad one for Liverpool fans, isn't it, this way?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't reflect well as well, you'd have to say, in terms of, what's happening with the project, in terms, obviously, because they came up a couple of seasons ago. They had a really good, strong first season, and the hope was that they were going to build on that. They kind of didn't. It was, they finished lower, and you still feel like they're a million miles away from challenging Chelsea, from challenging Arsenal, being anywhere near Manchester United and Man City as well. So I think it's disappointing from that perspective, really, from a sporting perspective. Really to kind of lose someone who was so important and was a really good player as well. So I guess, does this feel like this Liverpool women's project is kind of leveling out at kind of mid-table in the WSL? It feels like it a little bit. And I thought the kind of departure of Matt Beard was a bit of a strange one, really, around that. In terms of what were they expecting from him when you compare the wage bills and the money that they put into it in comparison to the other teams who they're supposed to be competing with, really. And I think this is another reflection of that, really, that the club doesn't have the kind of pull and isn't as strong as it should be. And I think, there's not a lot, I think, to criticise the ownership for, but I think in terms of the investment in the women's team, you don't have to spend a lot, or certainly nowhere near as much as you do on the men's team.
Yeah.
Get a lot back, really, in the women's side of things. The wages aren't outrageous. The investment in facilities wouldn't be anywhere near as much. I think what they did in bringing them back to Melwood was fantastic, but it just feel like it's kind of stagnating a little bit. So I would like to see them do a little bit more with the women's team. And as I say, I feel like that's kind of symptomatic of that, really.
Yeah, it does feel that it won't be the best of seasons in the offing, but we'll see what happens for the women's team there. And the comments are flowing in the chat panel, so we appreciate those. We will get on to transfers, as so many of you are asking for or commenting on. Now, we talked on Thursday because we had the Kirkhead announcement, and then all of a sudden on Friday, it came out of nowhere. It almost was a surprise, but it wasn't. Liverpool announced Freddie Woodman on a free transfer, set to leave Preston and come to us. I mean, it came from nowhere, but this does actually seem a smart signing, doesn't it, when you look at it?
Yeah, not one I sort of saw coming, this one, because I mean, Joycey put it out, didn't he? Got the story, as he so often does, and then an hour later it was actually confirmed. So that was an interesting one. But I guess it is a smart one. I mean, there was a lot of kind of gnashing of teeth about the idea that for so long Liverpool had Adrian as the third choice goalkeeper, and he was taking up a homegrown spot. I mean, the reality is Liverpool weren't really tight for homegrown spots, and if they had been, they would have just moved him on. If they needed to open up a spot, they would have just done that. So it wasn't really a problem. But that said, it does probably make the most sense to just to have a homegrown player as your third choice, really, in terms of maximising what you can have in the squad, really. So I think this is a smart move, and he's experienced. He's 28 years old. He is homegrown. He's played. He's playing at the Championship for the last 3 years as well. So, and playing every week. So maybe a little bit of a surprise that he's accepted this, because he's not going to play much at Liverpool. But of course, it is Liverpool, and how often do you get that opportunity? And he's obviously weighed it up and thought this was the right move for him. And so, hopefully it'll work out for everybody.
I mean, I know because you did a video on YouTube around the homegrown spots as well. And it's when you mentioned that the surprise that, as you say, 28, played 38 games or started 38 times for Preston, has been a regular, been their player of the season before. Normally clubs, I mean, you look at rivals, is it Scott Carson for City, Tom Heaton for United as well? It tends to be, with the greatest of respect, a 37, 38-year-old topping up the pension a little bit. So are you surprised that, I mean, he's probably never going to play as well, isn't he, in all honesty?
Yeah, exactly that. So that is the most surprising aspect of it. But I guess for someone like him, that the opportunity to be at Liverpool and see that setup and be part of that training every day to get the winners' medals, which he will. If he does that for 2 or 3 years and then moves on and goes back, he's still young then, isn't he, for a goalkeeper? So he can go back out and play football. So maybe that's his plan. But I guess the advantage for Liverpool is that you've got a kind of a really good age goalkeeper who, as I say, is homegrown. So, loads of upside in terms of that, really. So, if he's happy to do it, then Liverpool are happy to have him.
Yeah, it does. Not the most exciting, but the fifth incoming, and at the same time, not where we'll be stopping, because I know people are asking questions about this. And maybe the hottest name right now, there was various stories coming out all week, and even yesterday they were getting tweeted, weren't they, that Liverpool, Marc Guehi, this story won't go away. But the big thing that seems to be coming up is the fee, isn't it? Do you think that's ultimately going to be the decider as to whether Liverpool pull the trigger on this or not?
Yeah, well, this is it, 100%. I mean, you look at kind of what was said, last summer when Newcastle were trying to get him, and how firm Crystal Palace were on that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't absolutely hold out hope that they're going to drop on the valuation in any way, because they've shown in the past that they won't. And I know people say, well, the threat of him going on a free is there, so they've got to be careful about that. But maybe Palace don't mind it. They've qualified for Europe. I hope they get to play in Europe anyway with all that nonsense that's going on. I really do. They're doing well at the moment. They're a solid Premier League club. Maybe they think that they don't have to cash in. So, you just never know what the other club is thinking. And I don't have sources at Crystal Palace to maybe give me any indication on that either. So it's very, very hard to see how they'll approach it. But we'll see whether they soften in that stance, whether they think that it is just worthwhile them getting the money in the end. I think that is the key factor here, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. But I just think that's hard to kind of say how Crystal Palace are feeling about it at the moment, to be honest. But that's the key aspect, is I don't think Liverpool are going to want to go too high for a player in the last year of his contract. And they are firm on these things. They're not Manchester United. Yeah. This is why they always get a good deal, because they are incredibly disciplined about this stuff.
It is interesting the way it's being phrased. And I've seen this, as Cal Jones says this morning, even reports they are 25 million apart in valuation, which is a hell of a gap, in all honesty. And other reports saying as well, there are no plans to go into that 45 to 50 million. I mean, there's talks around a 40 million compromise. You wouldn't really hedge your bets either way for definite on this. My gut tells me it does get done, but I wouldn't bet on it solidly at this stage.
No, exactly, because it's quite a big gap, isn't it? In the end of the day, Liverpool will, they'll have that kind of Jarell Quansah figure in the mind, and that makes sense, because you're trying to replace him in the squad, really. So, I don't think we can go to 45 or 50 million, even if Palace want that. And I guess the question is, can Palace get that from elsewhere? But the key thing is here, I guess, is that the player's going to want to join Liverpool probably ahead of anybody else who comes in for him. So I think Liverpool will probably shake hands on something around 40 million rather than that kind of really top end of the valuation. But, we'll have to see whether that happens or not. And as you said, I don't want to get into the kind of predictions phase of this, really, because I just think it's one of those. Palace have to soften significantly, and Liverpool probably have to go a little higher than they're thinking at the moment. Yeah. So there needs to be that compromise there, and we're not quite there at the moment.
Yeah, will be interesting to see if anything develops this week on that. And the only other bit I want to put, which quite a few journos are reporting this, that if it isn't Guehi, it's a centre-back in this 18 to 22 age bracket. That does seem consistent, briefing across all journalists. Jarell Hato keeps mentioning it, or being mentioned time and time again. Do you think that is realistic talk, or just a name that's there as almost putting pressure on Crystal Palace point of view?
No, I think it's legitimate. I mean, his name's been bandied around as a potential target for a while. So I do think that is something that they're looking at. I think they're looking in that, that type of centre half has been on. We've talked about this so many times that is something that they're looking at. I mean, Diamande's one, Koulirakis is another. They looked at Euro, didn't they? So we know that they're kind of shopping in that market and have been for a couple of years. So I think there's some truth to that, absolutely. But I also think they would quite like to sign Guehi, and they've made that clear. So, but everything depends on that fee and how willing Palace are to do deal at a number that Liverpool are happy with, and they will walk away if that's not possible. They can't be dragged into doing something stupid by Palace. They've shown that repeatedly. So, let's just see whether there's the ability to compromise on both sides, and if not, it won't happen.
I mean, this is the one that interests me, that we'll obviously see if anything does run with Marc Guehi, but he's an interesting set of stats when you look at him. But ultimately, it comes down to, for a lot of people, if he comes for you ahead of Konate, competition, backup, where would you see him in the mix?
It's an interesting one, because he's obviously, all I'm hearing is that he wants guarantees around game time. And by what I've been told this week is that, I say this week, over the last couple of days, is that, he is keen on the move. So I guess he has had those reassurances that he's not going to come and sit on the bench. So I guess it's genuine competition, and the ability to displace Konate will be there. Now, that's interesting, because Konate is brilliant and wins everything. He's, when he's on song, he's right up there as one of the best centre halves in the league and in Europe, really. So how that competition shakes out is interesting. But I guess maybe they see there's real opportunities for him to get minutes on both sides. He is a little bit two-footed, and they think that he'd be a good mix with both of those. Maybe that's the way that they're selling it to him, and maybe Van Dijk is getting the rest every so often, which he didn't last season. So, they must be telling him something that makes him think he's getting some minutes. Exactly where that's up to, I'm not entirely sure. And I don't believe he's spoken to the manager yet. I think it's in a position where those talks are at sporting director level at the moment. So, but he must have a plan or something that's made him kind of give the green light to say that he will want to come. So that is an absolutely fascinating one, I think.
Does feel as well like we'll get something advanced one way or the other on that this week, but we'll have to wait and see. And I suppose other things that are advancing, people are talking about different positions. Alexander Isak refusing to answer questions at a Croatian restaurant about the Liverpool move. But we're talking centre-back, and we've talked number 9 before, as people are saying like Isak, Ekatike. It does feel like those are the two prime positions that are being targeted at the moment. Is that the two most likely? Do you think there could even be any more at all?
What, beyond centre half and centre forward?
Yeah.
I think, there is still scope for a kind of flexible forward, isn't there, of some sort to kind of come in. Maybe, if you can get Isak, maybe they go for him. But if not, someone who does something a little bit different in that forward line. I think they just need, it's so clear, isn't it? You need an elite attacker to come in if Nunez goes. So what exactly that looks like, I don't think you can nail down yet. But I think, that elite attacker, centre half, but there is there's scope in other positions, isn't there? If one of the central midfielders say that they want to leave, that's something they'll have to think about. If young opportunities come up in certain positions, they will always have a look at that. So I don't think you want to restrict them to that, but I think they are the two main positions that the squad will need and that will be looked at. But in terms of what they'll do beyond that, I think a lot of it's going to be opportunistic, and it's about people telling them they want to leave who have taken up significant minutes in the squad, etc. So I think that's what a lot of the business is going to be based on. But I think those two positions, elite attacker, centre half, are the two that you can guarantee at the moment. And then the rest beyond that is, it's the vagaries of the market at the moment, really.
which is crazy to say. Even with just those two, that takes us into 7 incomings already and could well be more. So yeah, the busiest summer for some time. And when there's incomings, there's got to be outgoings. And I mean, we'll start with the man in the middle lifting the trophy there, Jarell Quansah. That does seem, he was having his medical at 7:23, I think it was, UK time. So he's there early. We might well get an announcement on this today, might we?
Yeah, very possible, especially if he had that early start, I guess. Yeah, it's a good move for him, that as well. I think he's going to play a lot of football over there, learn a lot of lessons that he's not been able to learn because he's been sat behind the 2 centre halves all season. And we've seen so many young English players go to Germany and thrive. So I think it's a good one. I think it's a decent deal for Liverpool. I mean, the money they would have probably wanted higher, but the fact they've been able to get that buyback clause in is the reason that the fee is more kind of 35 than maybe 45 that we were aiming for. So that's the reason the deal's done there. But I still think it's a smart one, because if he does really develop, they've given themselves the opportunity to bring him back in, and if he stays at a sort of similar level, then it's not bad money at all. So I think it's one that works for everyone, really.
Yeah, and it's booked, as we said, as pure profit on the PSR and the club figures there as well. So it just works really well. And I suppose another player that it's important to talk about, Harvey Elliott. I mean, what a tournament this has been for him. That he was player of the tournament, scored in all the knockout rounds, double in the semi-final, another in the final. The cynical side of this now says it's probably closer to 50 million. Is that fair now?
Yeah, it absolutely should be. I mean, for a player of that quality and his age and that much Premier League experience at the age he is as well, they'd be absolutely nuts if they took anything less than that. For me, I don't think they should be kind of wanting to sell him, really. But if you have to sell him, you should be selling him for a decent chunk of money, because he's worth it. I mean, he's homegrown as well. So again, that adds more to his fee. So, he should be playing at kind of top end of the Premier League at the moment. And the clubs who are looking at him should be ready to pay that sort of money. So, they're going to get a decent chunk of change when they sell Elliott. And I do think that's going to happen. I think the writing's on the wall for him a little bit. But if he goes, they will not be giving him away by any means. And I think 50 million is the very least what they should be aiming for.
I suppose, and he's been linked with various clubs, but because we're probably talking now into the 50 million territory, without being harsh, does that tend to rule out a lot of what you think would be like the Red Bull Leipzigs, the other German clubs? That tends to be more Premier League territory, doesn't it, to be honest?
Yeah, it's kind of top end, isn't it? If you're a German club, I think we spoke about this with Quansah, actually. That was one of the issues for him, really, is that he was going to struggle to get to Germany because of the fee that was put on him. Obviously, the workaround for that was the buyback clause, and that allowed them to get a cheaper fee. But I think that kind of shows you, really, that money-wise at the moment, unless there's a clever workaround like that they're only going to probably get Premier League interest. But there is Premier League interest there, so that's something to consider. And the likelihood it is that there's going to be a lot of Premier League clubs who are interested in him, so maybe they'll be able to get that fee. And like I say, there's absolutely no kind of interest in letting him go unless they get near to that, or they get a workaround of some sort that allows them to get further money down the line, because you can't be giving away players of that quality, even if you don't think that they've got a place in your squad at the moment.
No, it will be, you'd think, inevitable, but somewhere around 50 million. And I should ask about the third one of the trio, Tyler Morton, because there's different reports and a bit of uncertainty around this, that he might only have a short time left to go in his deal. We forget that Middlesbrough had a bid around 10 million quid in January, wasn't it, at the end of the window, turned down. Again, it's hard to know without his contract details, but do you think somewhere north of 10 million, 15, something like that's reasonable for him?
Yeah, I suspect that's where Liverpool are kind of looking, is that towards a kind of 15 million. I mean, the fact that Middlesbrough did bid 10 million maybe does suggest that it's accurate that he's maybe coming up to 1 year out, or he is now 1 year out, because that is on the low side for a player of that quality. And I think when he was around 2 years, they were kind of looking for something closer to 20 million. But obviously, the hands are tied a little bit now. Maybe they will, maybe they're more willing now at this point to accept a kind of 10. But something, I'd say something north of that, as you say, would be kind of accurate. And Whoever gets him again is getting a very good player, still young, still got a lot of experience. And if it is that top-end championship, I think he'd slot in there very, very nicely.
Yeah, he's a good player. And that ball or the assist for the winner was absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, fingers crossed someone takes a good move there. And, I mean, this player, this one feels like it's going to run for a fair bit of the summer till something's decided either way. The chips are all on Liverpool's side of the table with this Luis Diaz because he's 2 years left to go on his deal. But again, reports as there on the screen, he is Al Nassr's top left wing target apparently, and they're prepared to offer in excess of 85 million euros, which is about 72.5 million quid. So if that type of money around 75 million arrives on the table for Luis Diaz, do you get the feeling Liverpool will think, because of the situation, we might have a serious look at this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as much as he's kind of not for sale as far as Barcelona are concerned, it's a different matter when a club comes and puts those sorts of terms on your table for a player who's 28 and has 2 years left on his contract. So, because everyone's not for sale up to a point, and I think that would be the point, is when that kind of money comes in. The big question here that just doesn't keep, I haven't yet to see an answer from anyone kind of close to Diaz's camp, is whether he's ready to go to Saudi or not.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything that makes me think definitely yes. But if he does give them the green light and he's keen on that and he come in with that sort of money, it's a bit of a no-brainer for Liverpool, quite frankly. And this is the kind of thing they've been waiting for with Diaz is, we will keep him up until the point that someone gives us the money that makes it very, very straightforward for us to sell. So we're not quite at that stage. I don't think he has given the green light to Al Nassr, and until he does, they won't come in with a bid. So, we wait and see whether that happens. But yes, my expectation and my understanding is that Liverpool would come to the table for that kind of money, because they'd be crazy not to, really. And then that's when you would start seeing movement in terms of, the other potential names that are coming in that attack. But these things have to happen, and we can talk about it and speculate around whether it's going to happen or not. But the money has to be there, the offer has to be there, and we're not quite at that stage, and we don't yet know if he wants to go to Saudi yet.
Yeah, it does feel like if he wants the wage increase, this new contract that everyone's talking about, and as Pipe Sierra said last show, this camp are disappointed. Well, it's going to have to be Saudi or possibly no one for the amount we're talking at the same time. So we'll see if anything rumbles on that one. And this one, it's maybe not quite rumbling the way we want. We talked about Darwin Núñez last week and the Napoli interest in him. Now, I don't know if this is the best turn for us, that there's still apparently a significant gap as it's put in valuation. And Napoli looking at another striker, I've never heard of him personally, but Lorenzo Luca, 5 Italian caps, Udinese striker as well. This doesn't spell good news for a Darwin Núñez to Napoli transfer, does it?
I don't know, though, because I'm interested in the reporting around that and kind of how it's worded around the Lorenzo Luca interest. It's kind of like, well, look, we've got this other option and we could get this done absolutely anytime we want to. Well, all right, then go and do it, because, Liverpool are like, well, this is what we value Núñez at, and if you're not going to pay it, then maybe you can go and get your mate Lorenzo and see how he gets on. It's clear that they want Núñez, and he is the target that they would ideally get. So I think this is just a little bit of kind of, putting themselves in a position, trying to, put it out there that, we've got alternatives. Liverpool used to kind of do this quite a lot in negotiations as well. I think it's nonsense, really, and it doesn't make me feel any less confident that a deal will get done. I still think there's room for kind of a compromise to be reached around £50 million or so. And maybe we will nudge a bit close to that. I think the clubs are a little bit far apart at the moment in terms of valuations. But there's a chance this one gets ironed out, because look, if they could get that deal done and they thought that Lorenzo Luca was good enough, then they would have done it by now, and they definitely haven't. So it doesn't make me less confident that Núñez will go. To be honest, I think there's still a way to go in this story with Napoli.
Will be interesting to see. I mean, it is a bit of speculation, and people have talked about Núñez's book value being at 20 million or just over on that. What do you think it is around that 50 million mark? Because the club will probably feel there's a loss coming, where they'll set a minimum marker. This is what we have to get, and we move on.
Yeah, I think that is kind of the number that Liverpool are aiming for. That's, when you talk to people, that's the feeling I get. I mean, I think a few people have kind of put out that Liverpool's valuation was like 65 million euros, which I think is about 55 million pounds. I think they would do a deal at 50. To be completely honest, that's from speaking to people around it. That's maybe the expectation on it. So obviously Napoli are a little bit short of that at the moment, but I think they should see the value in getting there, because you look at some of the Premier League players that have moved there to that league and done so well. I think Núñez has scored at a decent rate for Liverpool compared to the starts he's had. He works hard. He's very good at international level as well. Shows how good he is in a team that works around his strengths. So Liverpool shouldn't be dropping the valuation around him, I don't think. And I still think there's room for compromise on this one, and maybe it will be around that 50 million mark.
Will be interesting to see how many South Americans are left at the club come the close of the window. And I suppose the final thing to bring it together around sort of incomings and outgoings, all the reports still suggest that Liverpool have got money to spend, and it's there if wanted, when needed, if you want to phrase it that way. But there is also the focus on shifting players, balancing the books. But I think one thing we're pretty certain on, there's probably going to be incomings and significant incomings at the club still, isn't there, this summer?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a focus now on kind of opening up some space. I mean, for example, they've got 3 left backs, so they need to sell one without doubt. They've got, other areas where they're well stacked and they need to start moving people on. But I think, look at Darwin Núñez goes, you are going to have to fill his place in the squad. I know he wasn't the first choice striker, but the idea is to kind of get someone in who can come into that position and be bring the forward line up again. So that will definitely be the idea. And Harvey Elliott moving on, is Florian Wirtz's replacement in that attacking role, or is Wirtz a false 9, or is he going to play off the left wing? And all these things, but there are going to be spots opening up really, and there's still potential for other players to leave who might want more minutes elsewhere, and when they do, they will need to be replaced. So a lot more business to be done in this window, and that's quite exciting and interesting, and quite difficult to predict a lot of it as well. So there's a lot can still happen in the coming weeks, and definitely more signings to come.
Yeah, it does feel like other clubs doing business or not doing business might be key for what we go to. At the same time, we will have to see what rumbles on this week. And there we go, ladies and gents. A lot happening off the field. Incomings. Could there be a centre-half coming in this week? Possibly. Outgoings. It feels like there'll be a certainty a centre-half is departing, but both things could happen in different positions either way. All it leaves me to say as ever is, for the time, the insight, and for answering all our questions, David, it is as much appreciated as ever.
No, thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.